The information I'm going to give you is subject to change depending upon the interviews that are conducted, the physical evidence that we uncover, and the investigation that will be ongoing throughout the night into tomorrow and probably for a period of time after that. But what we know right now is that the St. Petersburg Police Department was conducting an investigation into a male by the name of Dominique Harris, whose date of birth is June 1st of 2000. Harris was wanted on a child abuse charge, and the St. Petersburg Police Department SIU, or Special Investigation Unit, was tasked with finding him and taking him into custody. They had some information that he was here on 18th Avenue South. They were able to identify him operating a vehicle. He was here at the food store at the intersection of 18th Avenue South and 14th Street, and he had parked in the parking lot facing to the south in front of the business. The SIU detectives called for uniformed St. Petersburg officers. A uniformed patrol officer and a uniformed canine officer arrived. There had been a second person in that car who was or is Harris's brother. He had gone into the food mart. The uniformed officers in marked patrol cars approached Harris and asked him for his identification. He provided some identification, and they confirmed that he was the person they were looking for. He rolled the window up on the car and refused their commands to get out. The officers tried to open the car door, couldn't get it open. They attempted to get into the car by breaking the car window. At that point, one of the officers' cruisers was parked directly behind Harris's car, so it would have been to the north. Harris put the car in reverse, rammed backward, striking the officer's cruiser, and then accelerated quickly forward, striking a concrete pole in the parking lot. He then was going back and forth, and I would describe it as a three-point turn type situation to then turn to the north. He squealed his tires, accelerated fast, and as he went to the north, he struck a citizen's car that was in the parking lot. By that point, the SIU detectives who had been in the area came into the parking lot and tried to stop Harris from leaving the parking lot. One of the SIU detectives parked his vehicle directly in front of Harris. Harris rammed into the front of the detective's car. The detective was pushing Harris back, and they were in this situation where the detective was accelerating and braking, trying to keep Harris from getting around him and fleeing the area. Other detectives' cars were on either side of Harris's vehicle. One of the detectives' vehicles was to the west and was within probably 2 feet, maybe 3 feet, of Harris's driver's side door. As the detective tried to get out of his car, Harris reached out the window of his vehicle with a semi-automatic handgun and fired rounds at the St. Petersburg detective, striking the St. Petersburg detective. He was shot mid-torso in the groin area. The detective was taken to the hospital, and he is, at last word, I'll say currently at last word, which was a little while ago, he was in surgery. He is in stable condition and being treated for the gunshot wound. After the officer was shot, he tried to get back into his car. There was a second officer in that car, and he had gotten out and took the officer who had been shot into a position of safety. Other officers continued to fire because Harris continued to be a threat. He continued to point his firearm at the officers and was continuing to fire. Now, all these sequences of events, as I said, are subject to change. It's based on preliminary information, talking to some of the witnesses, talking to some of the officers, doing a walkthrough here at the scene over the last couple of hours. But Harris was transported to the hospital. He is deceased. And again, the investigation is ongoing. It's about really all I can tell you at this point. I'm not going to tonight, before the officer who was shot went into surgery, Some of his family has been notified. Some of his family has not yet been notified. Some don't live in the area. He asked that we not release his name until he had an opportunity to make sure that his family was notified. So we're going to respect that, and most likely it'll be first thing in the morning before we release his name. But the only reason why we're not releasing his name, you know my feeling on this, is that we need to be transparent. We need to get it out there, and I always do. But under these circumstances, with the shot officers asking that we not do it so that his family can be notified, we're going to respect that. We do have, and I'm going to release it tonight, we do have inside the car that Harris was operating, and you're not going to be able to see it here probably, but we do have in there a photograph of the firearm, and I can tell you that I have personally seen, and it's here in the photograph, at least one spent shell casing from Harris's gun, which confirms and provides evidence and proof that Harris was shooting at the police officers. And again, the better photograph of this, I'll give it to our public information office, and they will get it out to you tonight so that you have that. But again, and there's at least one shell casing there. There's numerous shell casings on the scene, and we'll differentiate which belong to Harris and which belong to the officers. But according to the officers, he fired several rounds. And again, the gun is there, and we have the shell casing. So, Trevor, go ahead.
Sheriff, can you tell us that there was another officer we heard that was injured?
Correct. And that officer is fine. It was a leg injury, more of a twisted knee type thing. She may also have struck her head, have a concussion, but she was not shot, and she has been released from the hospital.
So the other officer shot, is he out of the woods? Is it going to be okay?
Well, he's in stable condition, and in the last word, he was still in surgery. But from everything that I've been told so far is that at this point it is not life-threatening, and that he is going to survive. So we're very fortunate, obviously, and I can tell you that from seeing it in there and being there where this happened and seeing the distance, it was very, very close quarters. And I would almost call it point-blank range. When Harris had his arm out the window, and from where the officer was getting out of his car, it was probably a foot or less. I mean, he was right there. So he's very fortunate, and we're all very fortunate that it wasn't worse, and he didn't get shot in a more vulnerable location, and the injuries weren't worse.
Can you tell us how long the officer was on or has been on the force?
He has been for a while. I'm not going to get specifics because I'm not going to play that game of trying to figure it out. But he's an experienced, seasoned police officer.
Can you tell me more about the suspect that they were looking for him? How long had they been looking for him, and why was it cornered here?
So they've been looking for him since on the child abuse charge since the end of October, and it was a probable cause arrest they had, and that the detectives in the Crime Against Children's unit had asked the SIU detectives to try and find him, and they had some information as to where he was, that he might be in this area. It wasn't specific as to the car that he was driving, but they were able to identify him, and that's why they were down here looking for him.
Any priors on him, history, since he was carrying this weapon?
Right. So I don't know the answer to that at this point. We have an analyst that's working on that, and I tried to get that information just before I came up to speak with you, and so I don't know.
The suspect was shot while he was sitting in his car, right? He wasn't outside the car.
Correct.
How many times was he shot? Do you know?
Multiple times, but I can't tell you exactly how many. There were definitely multiple rounds fired.
Was he still alive when he was sent to the hospital?
He was being treated by the paramedics, and he was pronounced deceased at the hospital.
Sure, that child abuse charge, do you know if that's physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect?
Yeah. So the way I understand that charge was Harris is 20 years old. There was a 15-year-old victim that he got in an altercation with at a playground. I don't know which playground or basketball court here in St. Petersburg. And as a result of that, he slammed the 15-year-old to the ground. So it was that type of a child abuse charge. It was a 20-year-old who slammed a 15-year-old to the ground, but it resulted in a felony child abuse charge.
Was that a male or female victim?
It was a male.
Sheriff, have you seen the cell phone video that's on Facebook that was taken from inside the mini mart?
I saw a piece of it, so I haven't seen the whole thing. There is a lot of video. We have collected video from the businesses here in the area. We are aware of that. I've seen some of the video. I haven't seen all of it.
Where does this as part of the task force that you head up on this, where do you go from this point as far as looking into how the officers acted, reacted, and what was done, and if everything was on the up and up?
So as I said, right now everything that we have is based on preliminary information. There are a number of non-law enforcement witnesses that we've identified. They are right now at the St. Petersburg Police Department. All of the law enforcement witnesses, the officers who shot, officers who did not. And so we're going to spend the rest of the night, probably into the early morning hours, conducting very thorough interviews of all the witnesses, including the citizen witnesses, looking at all of the video, and our forensic section of the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office is here, and they're going to spend the next many hours collecting all of the physical evidence. And so that will be what we will be doing, is interviews, physical evidence collection, looking at video, analyzing it, and then sitting down and going through it and matching up what the physical evidence shows with what the officers and the citizen witnesses say what happened, and see if it's consistent, inconsistent, what it shows, and then evaluate it.
And give us, as a refresher to our audience, what this task force does and why you are heading this up and not the St. Pete Police Department.
So earlier this year, we created the Pinellas County Use of Deadly Force Task Force. And no agency in Pinellas County that has one of its officers or deputies that is involved in the shooting is going to conduct that investigation. It's being done by an outside entity, an independent, neutral entity, to make sure that it is a thorough, complete, and importantly, objective investigation. As we did with the one a couple months ago up off of 4th Street. And I issued a report on that. And we'll do the same thing that we did then here. And I can assure everybody that it will be a thorough, complete, fair, and objective investigation. And we're going to call it the way we see it and call it the way it is, just as I did in that last one. And there were some things we pointed out in that last one that were of concern, and that's been pointed out to the St. Pete Police Department Chief Holloway, and he's taken the appropriate measures and action to look into it. So the purpose of the task force is to make sure that when we have officer-involved shootings in Pinellas County, that it's being investigated by an independent entity, and it is not being investigated by the entity that employs the officer or deputy who does the shooting.
Can you say how many officers fired their weapons, the number?
So I can tell you, and this is fluctuating a little bit, and again, this is one of the things that you face in this situation where it is a very fluid situation. It is either 5 or 6, as I know it right now, and so it's 5 or 6 officers that fired.
And in the suspect's car, can you describe what it looked like in the light, so we know in the video what it was?
Well, it's a small gold, I believe, I want to say a Toyota, but it's a small sedan type vehicle, a Toyota type vehicle. It's gold in color.
We would assume those 5 or 6 officers are on administrative leave. It's typical with this kind of situation.
That would be standard practice, yes, and that's a decision. That's not a decision because we're conducting the criminal investigation. That's a decision that Chief Holloway would make, but that is standard practice, yes.
Do you know how many times Harris was shot?
I don't. Multiple times, but I can't tell you exactly how many.
Do you have an idea?
We won't know that until the autopsy tomorrow.
And at this point, do you have an idea on how long this whole incident lasted?
How long the scene will last?
No, how long the incident itself from contact to the end of the shooting?
So by the time that the car was seen there in the parking lot, SIU called for the uniform officers. The uniform officers arrived and made contact with Harris until the time that the shooting was over with. Again, I'm going to, estimate this at, again, subject to change and it's fluid. I'm trying to give you the best information I can. 3 or 4 minutes. It all happened pretty quick.
Sure. Do you know how many rounds were fired in total?
I don't. A lot.
Was Harris the only one in the car at the time?
Yes.
Will there be forensics to match the round in the officer to Harris's gun?
So, if the round is in the officer, and that's something we don't know, he's in surgery. There is some preliminary information that it's a through and through round. So if the round isn't in him, we don't have it, of course we can't, but if we do recover the round, then the answer is absolutely yes. Because we have the gun and we would have the projectile. And,
Will you try to collect all of the dozens of rounds and try to match which guns fired which rounds?
well, again, when we're talking about what's here, we talk about two different things. One is you're talking about the projectile itself, and the other thing you're talking about is the casing, the shell casing. And so in order to do any type of matching, you actually have to recover. The casing isn't going to tell you. It has to be really the projectile itself. Again, that'll all be part of the investigation.
Sure. Was anyone else at the scene detained or arrested?
Yes, Harris's brother has been detained. Yes.
What was his charge?
He is being detained right now, and there is not a charge pending.
Are you able to say where the officers are at what hospital?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the
Are
question.
you able to say what hospital the officers are at?
I believe it's Bayfront. All right. So what we'll do is tomorrow. Again, we'll get this photograph out to you tonight. Tomorrow, we will either put something out and release additional information, depending upon what we find. It may hold a press conference to release the information, answer any further questions, and clarify some things. But we'll definitely get some more information out tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Okay. All right. Sure.